This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Alright, today is less of an investigation, though I do have 3 of those right now currently behind the scenes, and more of a discussion. That discussion, obviously having read the title before clicking the video, pertains to Abandonware, but before diving in fully, I want to tell a bit of a personal story. Growing up, I played a lot of RTS games. Real-time strategy was my favorite genre, all the way back to the original StarCraft, Stronghold, Stronghold Crusader, and Lord of the Rings, The Battle for Middle-earth. What you see in the background right now is original Battle for Middle-earth gameplay. Based on the Lord of the Rings IP, this game was one of the all-time greats, in my opinion. And I spent countless hours playing and replaying the 2 campaigns, leveling up in skirmishes, and playing LAN matches against friends where we would boot up the game, take the disc out after loading in, switch it to another laptop with the same copy of the game installed, and then run 2 instances of the same game copy because if you timed it just right, precisely, you could make that happen. Some of the best memories I have in my entire digital life come from this particular video game, and as a result, I still play it to this very day. Now, anyone familiar with this franchise will know that there was a sequel called Battle for Middle-earth 2. That sequel had an expansion as well called The Rise of the Witch King, and was a far more developed version of the game with multiple additional modes and especially features. Battle for Middle-earth 2, accomplishing a nearly impossible task at the time, was just as good as its predecessor, and once again, I spent an unbelievable amount of time exploring the world, playing campaigns, and crafting heroes. This is what I would refer to personally as the good old days in my life of playing video games, and somewhat recently, as I have done periodically for the past 16 years or so, I reinstalled the original game and played it once again. This was amazing. Contrary to the experience of many, the nostalgia I have for these 2 games is not viewed through rose-tinted glasses. I enjoy them today as I did 16 years ago, and having gone through this process quite a few times, I was excitedly waiting to start on the sequel. That excitement has given way to sadness. After an entire sleepless night, and several more hours, many more hours, during the following days, I attempted to download and play the Battle for Middle-earth 2 with no luck whatsoever. The game is now Abandonware, and rather than some sort of straightforward access, I was forced to try and find archived copies from north of a decade ago, modifying them in order to achieve access, which I've done numerous times in the past, but this time, no dice. Every single thing that I tried ended in failure. The game would start and crash, the game would have an error message, a black screen that never changed, a white screen that flickered, all sorts of different problems. I installed, uninstalled, modified, and reinstalled this game north of a dozen times, meticulously following the guides, carefully adjusting the files, and after all of that, even now, I simply cannot make it work. Now, obviously a lot of people aren't going to care, and why should they? It's a game from 2006, what does it even matter? But for me, this was an epiphany, because while this game still technically exists, it is becoming nearly impossible to actually play. Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2 are now Abandonware, and with that title comes a gray area of legality, a whole lot of trouble, and a realization that video game longevity is in a very precarious position. Before going further, this video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is a dedicated online learning community that is built around user experience. One of the things I like to make sure that I mention every single time is that the platform has no advertisements whatsoever, which means classes are able to be viewed at your own speed without any interruptions. One class that I myself recently have been taking is called Mastering Productivity by Thomas Frank. I like to think that I'm a fairly productive person, especially when interested in a given topic, but workflow, streamlining, and general productivity boosts for everything else in my production chain is something I have started to really examine and try to work on. This kind of class has helped in rather unexpected areas, actually, like digital file organization and management, or even just best practices for how to keep a calendar. I've never really prioritized these areas, and they legitimately are a significant way to boost productivity. Skillshare is created for all brackets of skill. It can be a hobbyist, amateur, or even professional who finds value because it allows people with real experience to communicate that experience to their peers in a helpful way. And when you join, you can even try out a Skillshare live class, which adds a new dynamic layer to the online learning experience. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link down below in the description will get a 1-month completely free trial of Skillshare, so you can start exploring right now today. Again, the link down below will give the first 1,000 users a 1-month free trial so they can explore the site right now. Big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring the channel. So what is Abandonware? Simply put, Abandonware is software that no longer has support, or official support. It is largely ignored by its publisher or manufacturer, and thus difficult to obtain or difficult to preserve. Arguments for and against the preservation and distribution of abandonware are extremely diverse, with some users advocating that all abandoned software should ethically be archived for posterity, and others claiming that when a company wants their product to end, it should simply cease to be. Obviously, I personally fall on the side of wanting continued access, especially for my childhood favorite games, but the debate here is as old as the concept itself and will continue regardless. However, video games are facing a transition of sorts, where the damaging impact of abandonware will be exacerbated to a degree that I don't think many people are actually prepared for. Always online games. This is a concept that most video game players have become intimately familiar with as of late, but it's a concept that spells disaster for the gaming world when combined with the threat of abandonware. Let me explain. And yes, this is a topic that has been covered many times by many people, and you could say I'm horribly late to the party, but having basically had my childhood whimsy crushed into bits, as my favorite video game seems to be slipping away forever, it felt like a good time to talk about it. Always online games, combined with a proven track record of abandoning support and distribution for a game after peak popularity, a trend that is especially true of major publishers, will add a new harrowing dimension to the concept of abandonware, which will turn it from a legal gray area to a veritable black hole. The story I just told hinges on a game that was distributed by disk. My disk was scratched and unusable a long time ago, but now technology allows us to have serial key generators and digital mounting software like gaming tools. Point being, you can overcome the physical restriction of the game and play it anyway. Maybe I can't right now, but I am determined to get it to work someday. In theory, the game is still playable for many people who perhaps don't have some obscure problem with their machine, which might be what's happening to me, preventing them from actually running it. But this is a game from 2006 that was never always online. That's important to remember. It did have an online component, but it wasn't always online, because even many single-player games now are requiring an internet connection at all times for any gameplay. This presents an obvious problem for a great many players who don't have stable access to high-speed connections, which is more people than you might think. And it's also indicative of a dramatic shift from physical to digital throughout the entire video game industry over recent years. But when combining this always online concept with abandonware, that is where things get scary to me. Always online games are a somewhat recent phenomenon. Not that recent, there are examples from the early 2010s, but recent enough to where not a whole lot of them have been abandoned yet, especially not at a AAA level. We recently had a scare with Assassin's Creed where a poorly worded Steam description basically made people think that their purchases were about to be revoked, which was pretty intense and made mainstream gaming news. But by and large, we haven't seen games from 2012 and beyond get abandoned en masse like we have with the early 2000s. Side note, here's a site called myabandonware.com, which has something like 20,000 games from 1978 to 2010. Anyway, knowing that always online games are a mainstream product of give or take 2011, 2012, and beyond, though there are examples from much earlier, a few of them, and knowing that single-player games which don't even revolve around online activities are following suit as well, we can start to extrapolate a looming problem. When a disc-based game from 2006, just as per my own example, gets abandoned, it's relatively simple, not for me, but for people far smarter than me, to deconstruct certain components of that game and archive it. However, when an always-online game with always-online DRM gets abandoned, that effort becomes infinitely more difficult, even downright impossible. Having the game be always online is favorable for over-the-air patching and general convenience. Undeniably it is, but if, or rather when, a publisher decides that the game is no longer lucrative enough to deserve support, and they will decide this, it's just a matter of time, that game is now far more difficult to preserve. The servers go down, access is restricted, digital files become possibly unusable, and you aren't even able to access everything you need locally in order to craft a workaround. Some companies might actively seek to make game data available and help preservationists get access, but not all publishers will do this. Most probably won't. And this means that when they have decided a specific modern game is no longer financially viable, everyone will lose access to it, probably forever, in a way where they might never be able to play it again sincerely, despite having legally purchased it. Now, I am fully aware, don't worry, that when you pay $60 or $80 for an always online video game, you're not buying irrevocable perpetual ownership. You are simply buying a temporary license to access it, which is a whole thing in and of itself. And that can be stripped away at any point in time for any reason. However, even with this knowledge in mind and ignoring the other obvious issues involved with that, a lot of people seem to be embracing short-term convenience over long-term viability. The knee-jerk reaction I see most often is, so what? Old games suck anyway, no one plays them, boo-hoo, play something more modern. But having spent nearly 7 years in the professional video game industry now, I see a looming problem that has yet to metastasize. Older games, 2012, 2014, even 2016, are on the cusp of becoming irrelevant. Not actually irrelevant, mind you, but financially irrelevant to the publishers. And when that happens, the title of Abandonware becomes true. An added factor of always online DRM or a necessary server connection in order to play will collide with a lack of support and a need for creative solutions, leaving the lingering remnants of once popular video game communities completely stranded without option. It's already a scary topic to me as someone who has now run headfirst into a near complete inability to access what was once a cherished part of my childhood, but there's more. Imagine the impossibility of preservation should more games embrace the cloud streaming model. Right now, there are some examples of games that have been simply wiped from existence, but as more and more companies move to digital-only formats, streaming options, and cloud storage on proprietary storefront accounts, this will make it so that most games that are abandoned simply fade into the black. It hasn't actually happened yet, at least not on a widespread level, but my gut tells me it's coming. And when it hits, as unlikely as this is to ever become reality, the only real solution would be for major publishers to embrace third-party preservation efforts, they're not going to do it themselves, and enter into a symbiotic relationship with abandonware websites and third-party modders, so that the products that people love can still be accessed. I don't see this ever happening because publishers often have a very unfortunate fiscal incentive to destroy access to previous versions of, let's say, a franchise, of a yearly iterative model, and funnel people into their newest iteration at full price, right? They have a fiscal incentive to do that. But in an ideal world, when the tsunami of abandoned and inaccessible games ultimately hits in force, which it will, they will be persuaded to reevaluate that model. Bottom line, while some people have been sounding the alarm on this very topic for years, I have been blissfully unaware. However, with a recent headlong collision with Abandonware, and difficulty accessing a cherished game from my past, I started thinking about it a great deal more, so I figured I'd talk about it. The combination of Abandonware and forced online gameplay, plus always online DRM, or even cloud streaming, which is far worse and far more scary, it's a daunting thought that as I get older and remember what gaming used to be, we're really going so far away from that, and it's kind of risky in my eyes. Maybe this is an old man shouts at cloud type thing, and people will just tell me to fuck off, even though I'm not that old, but I wanted to do a video and generally discuss it. That's it. If you want to support the channel, there are links down below, locals and Patreon for monthly support, Odyssey, a YouTube platform alternative, merchandise, social media, another YouTuber to check out, the video sponsor, Skillshare, the first 1,000 users to click get a free month, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.